Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start our interview on behalf of the Library of Congress through American Canyon High School. My name is Johnny Tamayo. I'll be interviewing our veteran, Jason Benton, who is a veteran of multiple armed services. And just to start, I want to ask, when and where were you born?
I was born April 16th, 1969 in Tachikawa Air Force Base, Japan. My dad was in the Air Force, and where he happened to be when I was born.
Okay. Who are or were your parents, and how did they make a living?
My dad was James Benton. He was, by the time I met him, he was finishing up the Air Force, and then he went to work actually at Napa Steel, right down the road before it became Kaiser. Well, it was Kaiser Steel, then Napa Steel. And my mom was a letter carrier. Jeanette Benton.
Okay. Do you have any siblings?
I do. Jennifer, my oldest sister, my sister Jamie, and my brother John. I'm the youngest. Not the baby, just the youngest.
Not the baby, just the youngest. Best thing. What type of things were you up to before your enlistment?
Oh, that was a big funny thing. A whole lot of nothing. I was just hanging out with friends, not really going anywhere and doing much, so I needed to make a change. I was working at fast food joints and doing mall security, little jobs here and there, but I wanted to make a difference, so I took the step.
Okay. Which branches did you serve in?
Served 8 years in the Marine Corps, 4 active and 4 inactive reserve, and then 7 years with the Army, 3 of which was active duty.
Okay.
Reserve.
So why did you choose to enlist in the Marines first?
The Marine Corps was my way to get my body right, my mind right, because I wanted to serve my country first, and then my ultimate goal was to go in law enforcement, so I figured I better be sharp-witted and be in shape, so I chose the Marine Corps.
Okay. How did you feel when you departed for boot camp?
Scared. Definitely scared. Didn't know what I was getting into, heard a lot of bad stories. I knew it was going to be something big, and I was going to be ready for it, but biggest thing I felt was apprehension, fear. Didn't know what was coming.
Okay. Do you recall any of your drill instructors, maybe names or how they treated the recruits?
Drill instructor Staff Sergeant Snell he was a monster. Big guy. He always called me Fat Boy because I had denser body weight, so I weighed more than the recruits, but I wasn't overweight. I was just heavy, so they called me Fat Boy. So I had to train hard because of that. And our senior drill instructor was Drill Instructor Wharton, Staff Sergeant Wharton, who looked like Tom Berenger. So there was also Staff Sergeant Silva, and the last one, we called him Webster on steroids, but I can't remember his name. I can see his face, but this was 1995, so it's tough to recollect those names. But I remember and Staff Sergeant Bermudez, who personally hated me. He told me he hated me, so I remember that part.
Wow. Yeah, talk about boot camp.
Yeah, boot camp was tough. It was 12 weeks of what they say is 12 weeks of hell, but they break it down and tell you you're not doing good enough, so you'll try better and try harder. When actually you're doing well, but you still want to push harder. And they break it down to the bare minimum and then build you up into a fighting unit. And you have to have cohesion with teammates. So they teach you to work with yourself and with the team, so it makes you well-rounded. But it's tough but worth it.
Is there any specific event that you remember having interaction with your drill instructors?
Well, we always interacted. It was the 10-mile hike up the Reaper. It was a famous mountain down in Southern California, and I remember Sergeant Silva just barking in my ear the whole time because I was supposed to stay up front, and I was lagging back a little bit, so that kind of stuck out.
Okay. While you served, did you participate in any specialized training, both Marine Corps or Army?
Marine Corps, I was tasked as security forces. I spent 2 years in Washington State studying on nuclear weapons, so we had to get a secret clearance and specialized guard training. So basically, we're heavily armed security guards. And then we went through our hand-to-hand combat training and got selected for the Bangor Naval Sub-Base Rifle and Pistol Team.
Okay. During your transition into service, how did you adapt to military life in the aspects of barracks, food, and social life?
Everything changed. You were told when to eat, you were told when to sleep. Especially had to keep everything clean. That's a big thing. But it's different from civilian life because you always knew when your next meal was coming. You always knew where you're supposed to be, what you're supposed to do. So there was really no question about how your day was going to go. And that part, a lot of guys needed for structure. But for me, it was kind of I was 26 when I joined, so I already had my own set ways, but they changed that real quick. So.
Yeah, sounds like it. So speaking of food, What is your favorite MRE?
Without a doubt, chili mac. I've seen guys almost get in fights, so with chili mac. The second favorite is spaghetti and meat sauce. That's cool, but chili mac that was the best stuff. It's actually pretty tasty.
I have to agree with you. I love chili mac. It's the best.
With the chocolate pound cake.
Yeah, can't go wrong.
No.
So, let's talk about your service after boot camp. Where are the different areas you served in?
Washington State, 2 years, and then went over to Camp Lejeune, Charlie Company 1A. Deployed to Okinawa. This is all peacetime, so we didn't actually deploy any hot theaters. So went to Okinawa for a 6-month deployment, where I was selected as an instructor at the Jungle Warfare Training Center, and then came back to Camp Lejeune to finish out my tour.
Okay. So, think a little deep about this. Some of your most favorable memories while you were deployed, because I understand you did go to Iraq when you were with the United States Army.
Yes. Well, that was a voluntary deployment. It was a unit called Mint Sticky. It was a multinational security transition team. And we were tasked with going over and helping Iraqi soldiers and Baghdad police officers learn how to take care of their own situations. So I went as force protection. My job was working on a database, searching through names, and making sure that the people that had access to our base were the right kind of people and catching the ones who didn't. And while I was behind the desk, I was suited up outside the wire as a PSD, which is a personal security detail for the 2 highest ranking officers on our base. So it was a Rear Admiral from the Coast Guard and a 1-star General. So whenever they left the wire to go have meetings with Iraqi counterparts, I was their security. And that part was it was fun, but it was a little hair-raising sometimes. I had to watch everything.
Okay, so that definitely answers my next question about whether you were support or on the front lines, and it seems like you were both.
Yes.
So I guess you could say that your experience with both was definitely interesting. And
well, the front lines, can't say I was actually engaged in a combat environment. They called it a war zone. We were in the red zone actually in Baghdad, away from all the protected areas. But as far as going into, say, like a firefight, unit against unit, that wasn't our tasking. So wouldn't say I was necessarily front line, but I was out there in the dirt. So when people say, oh, you went to Iraq, you went to war. I went to a war zone, but I didn't engage in combat activities. I was more for defense posture.
Okay, thanks for clearing that up. So my next question is, what was your MOS both in the Marine Corps and the Army? And I'm sure you said that before, but I want a little bit more emphasis about what those MOSs do, what those occupations really are.
Okay, in the Marine Corps, MOS is 0311, which anything 03 or 03 is infantry. The second 2 numbers says exactly where you are. So I was just a basic infantryman, rifleman. And the reason I chose that was because to join security forces, you had to be in infantry. So I didn't want to specialize in anything such as weapon or heavy weapons or machine gunner, so I just went with the basic 0311 infantry. And got a secondary MOS, which I cannot tell you the number, I can't remember. It starts with an 8. It was security forces. So my secondary MOS was I was a grunt, ground pounder, just carried a weapon. And then with the Army, when I transferred in with the Army, I came in. I didn't go to Army boot camp or basic training. They said, well, what's your MOS going to be? And I said, what's the same things infantry as the Marine Corps? They said 11 Bravo. So that's what I went with. And I got tasked as an instructor with the 75th Division because I had infantry background and helped them teach units that were deploying their tactics and doctrines.
Okay. And just to be clear, the 75th Division's completely separate from the 75th Ranger Regiment.
Completely.
I know there's a lot of confusion in that one.
It's a reserve unit and mostly heavily officer-based. I think there's maybe 20 or 30 enlisted, but the rest were officers, high-level officers, majors, lieutenant colonels, and colonels, and their job was just to provide instruction. So there was a lot of confusion. We'd go on our training missions to El Paso, to Fort Bragg, or Fort Bliss, and people see the 75th patch and think we're Rangers, but we'd make sure that they knew we were not Rangers, because that would be rude.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
So, how about your final rank for both the Marine Corps and the United States Army?
I left the Marine Corps as a sergeant in 5, and that finished my first 4 years. The inactive reserve, there's no promotions just because you're not active. So then I tried to re-enlist in 2003, and they said no because of a plate and 7 screws from an accident. And 4 years later, the Army called me, asked me if I wanted to join. I said the only way I'll come back in is if I keep my rank up in the Marine Corps. So 4 years after my contract in the Marine Corps, I ended with the Army as Sergeant E5 and finished as a Staff Sergeant E6.
Okay. So, I want a little more emphasis about the camaraderie and friendships you made while you were in the service. And if you can, just go ahead and tell us about your favorite one.
Favorite
Friendship, maybe one of the best teammates you've had.
Um, the difference between the Army and the Marine Corps is just that it's camaraderie. It's a lot stronger than the Marine Corps. It's a brotherhood. When you first meet someone, there's guys that you know. You might meet them later on, years down the road, and it's just like you never missed a beat. And the second they say, I'm wearing a Marine Corps shirt walking down the street, they could be a complete stranger who also has a Marine Corps shirt on, and we would be instant brothers. The difference with that in the Army, I always tell people the Marine Corps is a way of life, the Army's a job. Because the Army, although they have the teamwork and cohesion, it's not as in-ground and part of their core beliefs. But I have to say my favorite Marine buddy I'm still friends with, we served together in security forces, is a little guy named Carlos Diaz. He's about 5'6", and the day he became, my instant brother is because I was bigger than him, I tried to intimidate him, and he just gave me a shove back. So instead of wiping the floor with him, I respected his courage and his stupidity, and we've been friends ever since. In fact, I just found him on Facebook. He's in New York now, but we talked back and forth, and we were messaging each other a couple days ago. And another guy that I'm still friends with that I knew from boot camp is a guy named Jason Cooper. And we still talk back and forth on Facebook too. So a lot of guys I was with in the Corps, they found me or I found them, and we still stay in contact. And guys I met in the Army, there's a couple guys that I was friends with, but again, this wasn't the same. But there was a guy that I met in Iraq, who was actually in the Navy, but tasked on the same base, and we became friends. And he lives in Washington, but he moved to Sacramento, and we hung out again. So he's my best Army buddy, even though he wasn't in the Army. But that's one of my solid friendships I got from being in Iraq. So it's little things here and there. Pick up. These bugs are killing me. Have to edit that out.
So, speaking of friends and family, while you were deployed in Iraq, how did you communicate with your family and friends?
Found out that texting was very expensive. I changed my phone plan over because it was expensive to call, but texting, receiving was free. It was 50 cents per, and all my friends know that I text a lot. So that got pretty expensive, and I found out it was this new thing that we were just about to get called Skype. So I'm sure everybody's heard of it now, but I Skyped my friends, talked to them on Facebook, and texted a little bit, but most of the time it was Facebook. So we had to, our base was set up where we had our own Wi-Fi, so we can go in our rooms and sort of things.
Okay.
The timing was off, though. I had to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning and talk to my friends at regular time, but we got used to it.
Well, I guess you gotta do what you gotta do to see the ones you love, huh?
Yeah, definitely. Especially my great niece. That was always the fun part. She was 5 at the time, so brightened my day to look at her for a little bit. It was good. Got us through.
Yeah, I hear it's so. This is pretty much the same with a lot of veterans that deploy. They see all the younger people in their family, and it just, it makes their day. It makes it a little bit easier to go day by day.
It's a piece of home. Care packages helped a lot too.
Yeah, I've done a couple care packages, and I've gotten letters back too. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I sent a couple letters out to school kids, little kids. It's their class project. It's like adopt a soldier. I'm like, hey, so those are my guys.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. So, on your off time, while you were deployed, and even when you weren't, how did you keep yourself entertained? And let's be honest.
In Okinawa, we were so separate from the rest of our unit. There was just a few things to do: drink, play video games, or shoot pool or lift weights. And I wasn't good at the first 3, so I lifted a lot of weights and kind of gained my size. But being back on our deployments here, it was regular life because we were just going to do, well, we drank a lot, but that wasn't always the best thing. But we just hang out like normal friends, go bowling, shoot pool. But then in Okinawa, it was the same thing. Not Okinawa, Iraq, same thing. A lot of weightlifting, a lot. In fact, I got my biggest ever when I was in Iraq because it was you go do your duty and you come back and you either watch a bunch of videos that you buy at the store, or you play some video games. And after a while, same old thing. So you have to keep your mind right. So go out and hit steel, and it was quite beneficial. I was in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I've seen some of the pictures. You were a pretty big guy.
Yeah, I kept having to adjust my gear to fit. I didn't mind that.
Yeah, when life gets rough.
Yeah, I know, it's tough. Adjusting it to fit everything up top. So they always said when you go on deployment, you're either going to come back fit or fat, and there was no way I was going to come back fat. So.
Yeah, determination.
Yes.
That's the word. All right, so my next question for you is about your arrival home. Did you come home on a commercial flight or was it a military flight?
It was a commercial flight. When we came back, the way we left with our unit, it was pick and choose from a bunch of different units, so we didn't all go over together. We met up in Fort Benning, and then we flew together. But coming back from our deployment, we didn't all come back together because of our assignments and duties. So it was piecemeal, like two here, two there. So I flew back basically on a big plane with a bunch of soldiers that I didn't know, and I came back to Fort Benning for the last, say, 2 weeks of, they call it redeployment when you come back home. So I was getting redeployed. It was just going through all the closing outs of all the records. So by the time I flew home, I was solo on a commercial flight from Atlanta to Sacramento.
Okay. That sounds like a whole deluge of planning and preparation for all the higher ups. I mean,
You would think, but the reason it took so long because the planning wasn't there for this group. When it comes for like a whole unit, then everything works just fine. You flow through, and you come through an airport, and there's long lines of people, and they shake your hands, and they thank you for your service, and everything's great. But when you come back from a mission like this, and you're walking through, and nobody even knows because you're in civilian attire. So it's like, yeah, I just got back from Iraq, but they're like, they don't even know it unless someone asks you. So they notice the bag, and they say, so where are you coming from? And it's like, Fort Benning. It's like, oh, where are you before that? All right. Goes, oh, you just deployed? I'm like, yeah. And then they started talking, and other people hear it, and I wasn't one of those kind of guys who wanted the big parade. I just wanted to come back home and get back to life. So it was good.
definitely. I mean, I know that you weren't looking for the big parade and all that, but when you got home, how were you received by your family, friends, and other people that just happened to be looking in the direction?
Um, the other people, when they saw, like when we first arrived, they knew something was different about the arrival. A lot of hugs, a lot of tears. But then getting back to seeing my friends I hadn't seen in a while, they were a little apprehensive because they always hear the stories about guys coming back from war, PTSD, and being all nervous. So they walked on eggshells, so to speak. They were a little nervous about how to treat me. But after a while, they saw it. I was still me. So they didn't worry about it as much.
Okay, so in all technicalities, then you don't suffer from post-traumatic stress like some people would think that all veterans do.
I would not say I suffer from it. I've been told by a few people who have gone through counseling, they said that I should. My version of PTSD is hyperactive or hypervigilance because I was on alert the whole time I was there. It took me a while to come back and not be fully on alert. So I'd hear a noise and I'd snap to it, or I'd get up late at night, and it didn't really have that much of a negative effect on me. So when I say PTSD, I don't think that I'm in the same category as a lot of veterans that suffer from the night sweats and the terrors and the fear. And for me personally, I wouldn't claim it because I know there's guys who have been through a lot more who have this ailment that need more help. And at this point, I didn't think that it was a problem for me. So far, it's been okay. I haven't snapped, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, see that's an honorable that's an honorable thing right there, not claiming it because other people have it worse. And that actually reminds me of the debate between combat veterans and veterans in general, and how some veterans believe that somebody should be called a combat veteran if they've been outside the wire, and should be only called a veteran if they haven't been outside the wire. And it's just it's definitely a big debate that currently goes on. And if you don't mind me asking, what is your opinion on that?
Well, to me, a combat veteran is someone who has engaged in combat, someone who has been either shot at or sent rounds downrange at a designated enemy, and or been somewhere where they've been targeted by an enemy, either by mortars or by strikes. Someone who has basically a combat veteran is someone who's it could have gone either way. They could have not come home, or they could have been injured by enemy fire. To me, that's combat veteran. So when you deploy, you come back, you get on your right sleeve, it's called a combat patch. That means you've gone to a war zone. You've gone to an area where it could have happened. But I don't consider myself a combat veteran because I didn't engage in physical combat with what we call a target. I was there. It could have. There were areas where I had been, where there had been IED set off 2 or 3 days after, but because I wasn't there when it happened, I don't consider myself a combat vet. We were on a convoy. I was riding with the Rough Riders. It's a unit that drives MRAPs. They're descendants from Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders, and I went and did 18 missions with them on convoy, and we got hit by small arms fire one time. We were driving through, and you hear the ping, ping, ping on the outside of the hull. Well, we don't stop for that. You just keep moving. So even though that vehicle was under fire by small arms, we didn't stop. There wasn't any record about it, so it's not like I could have got a cab for it. It was a combat action badge because I wasn't involved in combat. So even though the vehicle got hit, we just kept going. So a lot of people say, okay, you went to Iraq. Well, where were you? In Baghdad. There were mortars going off outside our base all the time. You hear rockets going over. But we never got hit. We never got attacked. And there were areas, like I said, I had been, where IEDs had been set off later on. In fact, one instance, there was a stump. I was outside with my boss doing a security assessment. 2 days later, the British convoy team was coming in, and their vehicle had sensors that sent pulses out. It set off an IED. We zoomed in with the CCTV, and I was looking at this stump in the back, had them zoom in on that. It was a stump that I'd literally been standing on, was charred and blackened, because that's where the bomb was. So later on that day, they asked me if I wanted to extend for a couple of weeks, and I said, hell no, I'm done, because that was the third time I'd been somewhere where something later on happened, so I didn't want to press my luck anymore. That was it.
Hey, I guess knowing your boundaries is the best thing, including when you're in a war zone, huh?
Clint Eastwood said in one of his movies, a man's got to know his limitations. So at that point, he said, no, not press my luck anymore. That was it.
Well, thank you, Clint Eastwood.
At that point, 11 months and 23 days was more than enough time to send. That was good.
Definitely. So, out of curiosity, because you've been overseas, has that affected maybe you joining any veterans organizations that are related with deployed or formerly deployed veterans? Or are you just in a veteran organization in general, or none at all?
Not really. I signed up with the VA Services and Veterans Administration. Both of them. One is it's kind of a satellite. They're not working directly with the government, but they work for veterans. But at this point, I've been knocking around the idea of joining the VFW. There's one that in my local town I go check out. But again, Veterans of Foreign Wars, a lot of these guys are combat veterans. So I wouldn't feel like I was part of their class. But it's still something I'm going to check into, that and the American Legion. But I can share some stories later on. But again, my stories don't even come close to walking and see a Vietnam vet or someone who went to even Kosovo. You know, that was combat too. But I would feel like a poser, really. If I showed up and started on combat vets and like, okay, I went to Iraq, what would you do? And I sat in an office and punched keys. I wouldn't feel part of their caliber, even though not everybody can do what we did. I don't feel like I would be lumped in that group because to me they're held to a higher standard.
Okay. I appreciate that look on that aspect. I really do. Next, I want to ask you about after your service. So I understand you're no longer in the military, correct?
No. My contract ended October last year after 15 years total.
Okay, so now that you're out of the military, what are you doing now?
I work at a refinery in Martinez. And pretty much nothing has changed over the last few years. When I came back from deployment, I went back to reserve status, where you do 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year total. But the unit that I was with, it was a combat service support, and they were just basically doing logistic things. So my lifestyle hasn't changed that much since I got back. I go to work, and then once a month, I put on the uniform, and I go play Army, and then I come back, and I go back to work. So it's pretty much coasting now. So the day that my contract ended, it wasn't, a big parade, big deal. That was it.
So just to be clear, with your enlistment, isn't there 1 year where after your contract ends, you're still part of the military? They can call you back if they need to?
In this situation, in mine, no.
Okay.
No. Not for me.
Is that because you were reserve?
I was reserve, and the reason I did not extend my contract was because I injured my back when I was in Iraq, and I couldn't do the physical fitness test, the 2-mile run. I do the push-ups and sit-ups, no problem, because I had a compression injury. I fell off of a truck. I couldn't do the run. And without the accommodation of changing and doing an alternate PFT, which my unit was not available to give me, I couldn't take the test. So without taking the test, I couldn't re-enlist. So it was kind of a mutual thing with party companies, and that was it. So I am not subject to recall, and that's a good thing.
It must feel nice.
It does. I did my turn. So,
definitely. So now, if you don't mind, I'd like to just go ahead and reflect on what we've talked about. And, I just want to get your take on everything we've talked about. And I want to start by asking, your experiences overseas, how have they affected your life?
Okinawa, not so much. There wasn't much of an impact because I was still getting used to things. But one thing that Iraq had taught me is I appreciate little things now. It's one of my favorite phrases. I used to always tell people when they would complain about the heat or the food or what was going on, I would always say, it could always be worse. And I even wrote a poem about that. And it's like, it doesn't matter what's going on now in my life. If something happens to me, people will wonder why I don't stress out or why I don't get upset. And I just smile and I say, because it could be worse. It teaches you, like, especially when it's hot, when it's like 90 degrees, people freak out like, oh, I'm going to the pool, it's so hot. And that was 90 degrees at 8 o'clock in the morning when I was over there. And just taking little things for granted, like coming outside and, you know, there's a sandstorm. You can't go outside because you'll get the grit in your teeth. And just the little things, appreciating what you have. It's probably the biggest thing I learned over there is I had it good. And it was not too bad when I was there, but I knew it could be worse.
Definitely. So are there any other life lessons you've learned from your service in both the Marine Corps and the Army?
Never waste a day, because tomorrow's promised to no one, no matter what you're doing. You could be just training with someone, and something can happen, and that could be it. But another thing I learned, trust yourself, and don't take no for an answer when it comes to yourself. Just push, because the only thing that can stop you is you. So my confidence had always been growing from day one of the military. But like I said, the only thing that can stop you is you. So it's confidence and drive, honor, courage, commitment is a core value.
Definitely.
Is that close up?
So, understanding that your father was in the military, has your both of your enlistments, have they kind of changed your perspective on the military?
As far as my father's enlistment, he retired when I was 4, when I was 5, so there wasn't really much that I could have seen the difference. My family life wasn't really affected by the military. But for myself, again, being able to go and do at a moment's notice has taught me that it be versatile and be flexible.
Okay.
I like that.
So, what message would you like to leave future generations that will end up watching this video later on?
As far as military?
As far as military and life in general, because I understand you've been through a lot, so you know, to get your perspective and your opinion on that, I think all of the future generations that will watch this through the Library of Congress would like just a little bit of advice.
Like I said, don't waste any days. If you care about someone, make sure that they know it. Don't go to bed angry. Solve all your problems with all your friends as soon as you can. And a big thing I learned is forgiveness is more for you than for the person. If somebody does something to you, you can forgive them, but it's not for them, it's for you, so you don't have to harbor anything in yourself. I've learned to let things go easily, because the happiness that I've learned now comes from within, so you have to have somebody work or rely on somebody else for your happiness. But again, just be true to yourself, and everything else falls in place.
Okay, so before we conclude this interview, do you feel like there's anything you'd like to add? Anything that we may not have covered that you'd like to share? Could be anything. Anything.
Take the time to appreciate beauty. Go outside and just look at trees and go for walks, places that you haven't been to before. Explore. Go see, do things that you haven't done. Every once in a while, go find something that you haven't done. Just go do it, either with a friend or by yourself. And just, like I said, just appreciate everything you can, because you never know when it's going to be over.
Definitely, definitely. So, I understand that you did bring a couple items, a couple artifacts for us to share with the Library of Congress and the rest of the American citizens that are interested in what you've been through and what your story is. And before we go ahead and conclude this interview, I just want to go ahead and ask about what you brought. I noticed you brought some Army covers. You brought a dress uniform. I believe it's the Army Blues cover.
Right, ASU.
Yep, the ASU cover and the ACU cover. And I'm just curious, why did you choose these items?
Well, primarily because they're things that I wore. It was part of what I used. I also brought one of my Marine Corps dress shirts. It's dress Delta, the short sleeve with the rank on it. And these are just things that we didn't go buy in the store just to have on display. Are the things I actually had with me that I wore, as part of my uniform when I served.
Okay. And I guess you feel the same way about the patches as well, because I noticed you brought multiple unit patches, as well as a rank, name tape, and a flag, which I believe is one you used while you were in Iraq, correct?
Yes, it's the subdued IR flag, and actually when his IR beam hits it, infrared, it glows. So it's a way for units to tell if they're friendly or not. So it's something that helps avoid friendly fire pretty much. And 3 unit patches.
Definitely. Well, we appreciate you coming out here and sharing your story and your experiences with the United States military, and we appreciate everything you've done. I'd like to go ahead and conclude this interview, and once again, thank you for your service both in the Marine Corps and the United States Army.
The honor was mine.
From myself and a grateful country, thank you.